Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I'm outside with long sleeves. It's about 22 degrees and it's very comfortable in long sleeves. Of course, probably Japanese people, because they're so slim, no meat on their bones, they're probably all wearing down-filled jackets by now. No, that's not true. I'm just watching people walk by on their way to work still in t-shirts. So I exaggerate as usual. First, a little bit, not really a rant, but I want to congratulate the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, Abdul Razak Gurna. This is his latest novel, as far as I'm aware. It came out last year, Afterlives. I got it on, I think I've heard about it on Eric Carl Anderson's channel, but I think it was on a book haul, not that he read it, but I could be wrong. And I'm interested in him. I'm sure he deserves the prize. It is a bit of a misnomer to call him a Tanzanian writer. I'm not sure of my Tanzanian history, but either Tanzania didn't exist when he was born, or he was born in what was then known as Zanzibar, that was a separate country, or if not a country, pseudo-country, not Tanzania. And then I don't know if Tanzania, if it got folded into Tanzania or Tanzania didn't exist. That part I don't know, but the Tanzanian government apparently is claiming him, and that's fine. But I would call him a Tanzanian British writer, or a Zanzibarian. I don't know what I'm talking about, really. I'm not so fussed about that part, but I do share Britta's outrage at the fact that yet another man has gotten the Nobel Prize for Literature. The Nobel is a misogynist institution that should probably be disassembled and, ignored. As the last time I checked, and I haven't been following it closely because I don't really care about anything other than literature, but I don't think any women have got any Nobel Prize this year. So that is not only insane, that is deeply, deeply offensive. So I never cared about the Nobel to begin with. I mean, it's all about bombs and guilt over bombs. Who cares about the Nobel? But I am pissed off that women are being ignored by the Nobel Prize. So I think we should all start ignoring the Nobel. I don't want to ignore Gurna. He sounds like an interesting writer. And if it has to be a man, at least it wasn't a white man, because white men have the least significant things to say in culture these days. Let's put that out there. And I am not just being hyperbolic. It makes me want to get to this one even sooner. Has anybody read this? What did you think? So that's my little bit of a rant. Personally, there was a fairly sizable earthquake in Japan just before bedtime last night. I think it was about 10:45 p.m. I had finished the edits for the most recent bite-sized book chats, and was watching it one more time because, tighten up the edits and stuff. I do that always, almost always, and regret it when I don't. But I was sleepy, so I was having trouble staying awake. So I probably missed some jarring edit fails. And then suddenly, earthquake came. I was home alone. Kenji was still at work, although I think he had just left work. And it lasted about 30 seconds, and the dishes rattled. If it makes the dishes rattle in the apartment, then I know it's pretty strong. And it was apparently the strongest earthquake in the Tokyo area since the big one 10 years ago. But it didn't feel dangerous. I was standing up, ready to leave the apartment if need be, but then it did stop. But there were a few isolated injuries. People fell and hit their head. There was one fire in a Tokyo suburb and so on, but no deaths as far as I know, and not that serious. But they say another one that big could be coming in the next week. So I didn't finish the story about Kenji. He got stuck on the train on his way home from work, and the train was stopped for about 2 hours. He didn't get home until 2 a.m. I was long gone to sleep. Very briefly, because I don't think it's that interesting a story, but I'm still slowly coming out of the brain fog. I think is pretty much gone, but I have been left with a pretty severe case of insomnia. It's finally dissipating, but earlier this week I was still really having trouble with my 20, 30, 40-minute afternoon naps, which are pretty standard in my life as an old geezer. I just, for about 2 weeks, I would just go have the deepest sleep that I couldn't come out of for 2 or 3 hours, and that is finally not a problem. But Monday, I went down for a short nap at 1 o'clock, I think. No, at 2 o'clock, so I was planning to wake up at 3 o'clock, have 2 hours to read and so on, before I taught a class on Zoom at 5 p.m. Every Monday, 5 p.m., I teach for an hour on Zoom. By almost 3 o'clock, I was still wide awake. So I just couldn't. And so I did something that I haven't done in 30 years. I actually looked up a guided meditation on Zoom. Feel your forehead, relax your forehead, feel your face muscles relax, and da. And the next thing I knew, it was about 4 o'clock. I couldn't believe I slept that long, and I was so deeply asleep, and I fell right back to sleep, deep sleep. The next time I looked at the clock is my iPad, it was 4:40 p.m., and I thought, I've had such a long nap. I better get up and make coffee before I teach in 20 minutes. And the next time I looked at the clock, it was 10 after 5, and I was getting frantic text messages from my students saying, "Where are you?" Because I'm never late for anything. I am neurotically punctual. And so, yeah, guided meditations are dangerous, people. Don't go near them. But nothing like that's happened. I'm able to have 20, 30, 40-minute naps and wake up from them as per usual, and sleeping well at night, and so on and so on. So, on to the books. I actually didn't finish any books. So I only have one bail to tell you about, and I kind of pressed the issue. I forced myself to bail so I could start a new book this week, which I think is completely valid. This book wasn't working for me, and I just thought, okay, if I'm not really wanting to pick it up, with my new improved, much more trigger happy bailing policy, I bailed on it. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But what I noticed with my reading is when I push myself to finish a whole bunch of books one week, then the next week I kind of have to take a break from having any imposed reading goals to finish books for my Friday reads. And I know a lot of you, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments about it, and my booktube besties often tell me, "Sean, you're crazy. That's not what Friday reads is about. It's not like this deadline where you have to have a bunch of books finished to report to your subscribers from." No, Friday reads is just to talk about stuff you're reading and anything to do with what your reading life, and that's true. But it has been a very useful thing for me to set my weekly clock by the fact that by Thursday night I want to have stuff finished, so I have stuff to talk about in Friday reads, and that's how I kind of motivate myself. But when I give myself a big push, which I did last week, I think I finished 7 books, then I just have to take a break from that and just follow my nose. And so I don't have any books finished. And I might give myself a push next week because, there's stuff for October and whatnot that I want to get to this month. This week, I just took it easy. I read quite a bit, but I just dabbled. I just dipped into a book for 5 or 10 pages and put it down and, did that kind of reading, and that was fantastic. And that's exactly what I needed. And I'm sure, like I say, there's a whole bunch of you out there that are shouting at the screen saying, "That's what you should always do. What are you doing? It's not homework. It's not an assignment." So, enough said about that. When I'm filming, I keep forgetting to say, "And here is this week's highlights, this week in review," and so I have to keep putting it in this way, but here it is. He's actually quite handsome, and, I might have to write a rebuttal novel called "Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit to Eat" while I'm naked.
I absolutely love it. I can't recommend it enough. It uses the polyphonic voices of the one character, who is the narrator. It's philosophical, it's extremely humorous, it talks about the spiritual connections that we have with nature. It's about colonialism.
I discovered that I love listening to classics and nonfiction as audiobooks. I find them much more accessible that way, and I really enjoy it when a classic has a whole cast of characters to listen to. I really like that. So it was a good discovery for me.
I think coming of age is typically not a very happy time for most of us. I don't know about your coming of age, but I'm still in the middle of my coming of age, and it's really sad, Cecilia. So, sadly, the book that I bailed on was this Korean novel that I'd started way back in August for Women in Translation Month. I'll Go On by Hwang Jungeun, translated from the Korean by Emily Yae Won. This was a recommendation by the Irish novelist Ronan Hassen, personal favorite of his, so I feel bad that I didn't get along with it. I didn't hate it, but after 80 or 90 or 100 pages, I just didn't care about anything or anybody. So it didn't draw me in. I didn't feel invested. It was about a kind of a sad, hard luck, poor family with lots of tragedy, and objectively I could see that these were sad lives. But subjectively, I really didn't care. The writing was fine, but there was something about the way the relationships between the characters and the characters themselves were delineated that just I didn't connect. So I stopped. So other than that, I have 4 books that I started to tell you about. Let me start with the one that's in ebooks so I don't forget it. And that is Roughing It in the Bush, the 1852 or something like that, 1850s memoir by the Canadian writer Susanna Moodie. And it's her immigration memoir. So the story opens as the ship that she's traveling on in first class is just arriving at the St. Lawrence. Grosse Pointe, I think, is the island. And boy, it's really well written. So it reads like a novel, and I don't think I'm going to absolutely love it. There are parts of it that are a little bit draggy, but she is a really good writer. She's a complete and utter snob. So the only reference so far to Indigenous people that she sees, I believe, on that island is how much more well-behaved they were than the rowdy Irish and Scotch passengers on the ship in steerage. It's actually much more interesting than I thought it would be so far. I'm barely just a smidge of the way in, but so far, so good. And like I said, this is a book that Leanne Batas-Samosake Simpson wrote Nupaming in response to, so I'm certainly going to be reading it with that in mind. Maybe the hit of the week so far is also for October. George Moore's novel Esther Waters, published in 1894. George Moore is an Irish novelist, and oh my God, it's about Esther Waters is a maid, and she's just starting a new job at the squire's house somewhere outside of London. Comes from a really violent home, violent stepdad, who doesn't want to look after her. I think she's 19 or 20, I don't know how old she is, but probably something like that, maybe even 18, I don't know. Illiterate. I can't remember reading about an illiterate protagonist in Victorian literature. I must have. You can educate me in the comments, but it's really interesting about her illiteracy. And more than that, she is portrayed so sympathetically that I actually got a lump in my throat by the end of chapter, was it 2? I think that's how far I'm into it. Chapter 3, I got a lump in my throat about it, so that bodes well, because when Victorian fiction moves me, that's quite something. I only think of maybe that one moment in Trollope's novel, the first one of the Can You Believe Her? Can You Forgive Her? There's a moment in there that almost made me cry. And I can't think of any other example in Victorian literature where I was viscerally moved. Certainly not the Old Curiosity Shop and the Death of Little Nell. Any chance I have to trot out the Oscar Wilde comment about the death of Little Nell, I take it, where he wrote, you must have a heart of stone not to laugh at the death scene where Little Nell dies. Yeah. Anyway, Dickens is the most overrated writer in the world. But this is starting out really, really good. This is a buddy read with Joe Smith. We're going to check in tomorrow or the next day on the first 55 pages, so I'm most of the way there. Oh, I wanted to set the record straight. I won't identify my friend that pointed out that I used a phrase that is often used very offensively as a euphemism for rape. I said the protagonist was taken advantage of and left with as an unmarried mother. And just to be clear, I didn't choose the phrase carefully, although that phrase, to be taken advantage of, has 1,000 different meanings. But in context is closely bound up with the fact that she was left with a child out of wedlock. That was problematic. So let me set straight. I haven't read enough of the book, but I am quite sure that it was not a case of rape, but a case of being deserted by her lover when she got pregnant. But yes, that phrase was a little problematic, so I have set the record straight. If it is rape, or if I think it is rape, I will be sure to tell you, because you shouldn't beat around the bush by using those stupid euphemisms. So let me make that clear. And I have started this Swedish novel, The Family Clause by Jonas, Hassen, Khemiri, translated from the Swedish by Alice Menzies. And I'm liking how it's starting. It is strange, but in a way that's really quite engaging. The characters are not named. They are all described enigmatically by their familial relationship, but there's a whole bunch of subtextual narrative going on. Like the opening sentence is, a grandfather who is a father is back in the country he never left. So there's all kinds of things about where do people live, where are they from, that is complicated and fascinating. But a grandfather who was a father, and then his son is described as a son who was a father, and then later when there's a reflection back in the third person of something happened earlier in his life, a son who was not yet a father, and it's like that through the whole thing. So that's interesting, a little bit cumbersome maybe, but better than using characters' names. I think characters' names should be banned from fiction. It seems like the patriarch of this family, and it's not named, maybe it never will be named, what part of what Arabic country the family comes from that he goes back and forth between. I mean, it's probably, I'm going to guess right now that it's not named, and that's fine. But yeah, lots of stuff about immigration and a very complex, dysfunctional family. Yeah, this is starting out to be a Sean book. And finally, I have started Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kawai, Strong, Washburn, and this is also starting out really good. I wouldn't say I'm loving it yet, but I'm certainly engaged and liking it. This is a buddy read with Lindsey. The plan is to have 2 Zoom chats that I'll post. I've got a backlog of longer videos to edit, so they may not get posted for a while, but there'll be 2 installments. So if anybody wants to read up to the first half, I can't remember exactly where the first half is. I'll put it in the show notes if you're interested. The first video will go up in about 2 weeks. And again, these things, great, best laid plans, right? Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but Lindsey and I are both enjoying it as it starts out. We haven't discussed too much our reactions, just that we're enjoying it. So those are the books I've started, and they're all starting out quite well. So because I bailed, I get to start one more, because I thought, I really want to get going with Victober and Invisible Cities. Those are the main things. Plus, because I've got so much backlog of stuff that I'm just not finishing up as quickly as I thought I would. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's not connected to any readathon or whatever that I'm dying to get to, but I think a lot of that's going to have to wait till December. But I am going to start the Jamaican memoir, Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands by Mary Seacole. This is also a pick for Mel of Mel's Bookland Adventures, Reading Around the World Club, and she picked it because it would qualify as a Victober reading, a Victober book. I'm looking forward to starting that. I'm always complaining about various things. I hope my microphone's working. It always works when I go outside the house. Those of you that care about these sorts of things will notice that actually that same problem started in this video at the 16-minute and 53-second mark. And I do remember that I accidentally touched the microphone when I set one book down and picked up another book. So there is something about the sensitivity of the microphone in terms of touching it, I think, is the issue, which means probably the microphone needs to be replaced. Maybe? Anyway, it's not terrible, as you have all assured me, but the quality went down noticeably here at the 16-minute, 53-second mark. Ugh. Got some good advice about what to do, and I'll try that. Thank you, all of you that gave me advice. But the week before, I think I was complaining about the fact that my other iPad that I use for my notes and stuff, the battery's dead, and somebody suggested that I buy a new battery. Oh my god, I never thought of that, so I'm going to look into that. In the meantime, this is my little when I have to make a video outside of home. When I'm filming outside, I need something to write a few notes in. So this is my little gay notebook, and there's my first note. Because I knew I wouldn't be able to remember the title of that. Short Friday reads, because I didn't finish very much, but I'm in a good space and looking forward to having a whole bunch more to tell you about, and I'm not going to kill myself to do it, but I might push myself a little so that I can... I am not... Anyway, that thought tapered off without me finishing the sentence. I think you knew where I was going, because I can't remember where I left off with the sentence. A couple more things just before I close. You have about 24 more hours less by the time this video goes up. By the time this video goes up, you've got just over 12 hours, if that, to enter the book giveaway contest, and the book cover fragment contest closes at, I forget what time. I'll put it on the bottom of the screen, but on Saturday. Camera flip videos I will accept any time, but I'm imagining that there won't be any more. But if you're in the middle of working on one, don't worry, you don't have to get it to me by tomorrow. But I will accept it happily whenever it comes in. And I am barely going to do anything for Nonfiction November. I've got a couple buddy reads, I think. Aside from that, I am focusing solely on, and a lot of those books will be nonfiction as well, Indigathon. This is the second year, I believe, for Indigathon. It's certainly the second year that I will be participating, and I am so excited, and I'm having trouble whittling down all the books I want to read. I mean, I've been reading Indigenous fiction and nonfiction all year, longer, but I want to really concentrate on it in November. I'm having so much trouble squeezing as many books in. You know me, I'm not going to read them. I'm going to bail on a couple, and I'm not going to necessarily finish them up within the month, but I'm fine-tuning my TBR and having a blast doing that, so stay tuned for that video in the next week or two. And that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching.